The stars beyond the observation port of Research Station Kepler had never seemed more beautiful, Dr. Marcus Reeves thought, as he calibrated the exotic radiation detector for the third time that morning. After 8 years studying the peculiar emissions from the neutron star designated KPL 247 prime, he still felt the same wonder that had drawn him to astrophysics as a child in Buenos Aires. Behind him, junior researcher Yuki Tanaka was arguing with the station's AI about optimal sensor placement, her voice carrying that particular mix of frustration and excitement that meant she was onto something interesting. The station housed 47 souls, all civilians, all dedicated to expanding humanity's understanding of the universe. They had no weapons, no military training, no reason to expect they would need either. They were scientists, technicians, cooks, and maintenance workers living on the edge of human-controlled space, protected by nothing more than international law and the general decency most species showed toward non-combatants. That protection proved worth exactly nothing when Warlord Krev'nash's fleet emerged from jump space 300 kilometers from the station. The Zelvari were apex predators, products of a high-gravity world where only the strongest survived to reproduce. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, with scales that could deflect small arms fire and claws that could rend steel, they had taken their evolutionary advantages into space and built an empire on the principle that might define right. Their culture celebrated conquest, subjugation, and the proving of dominance through combat. They raided weaker species not for resources or territory, but for sport and to capture slaves who would serve as living trophies of Zelvari superiority. Krev'nash himself was a specimen that other Zelvari found impressive, his scales bearing the scars of 100 duels, his reputation built on the ruins of 24 conquered outposts. He stood on the bridge of his flagship and regarded the human station with the same detached interest a cat might show toward a particularly slow mouse. Humans were still new to the galactic stage, barely a century removed from their first faster-than-light journey. They were weak, soft, ruled by sentiment rather than strength. They would make adequate entertainment. The boarding was almost pathetically easy. The research station's hull buckled under breaching charges, and Zelvari warriors poured through the gaps in powered armor that made them even more formidable. Dr. Reeves had just enough time to activate the emergency beacon before a clawed hand seized him by the throat and lifted him off his feet. Around him, his colleagues were being herded into the central habitation module, some showing defiant faces, others paralyzed by terror, all equally helpless against their captors. Krev'nash addressed them in heavily accented standard, the language most species used for interstellar communication. His translator unit rendered his hissing speech into words the humans could understand, though it could not convey the contempt that dripped from every syllable. "You are prisoners of the Zelvari Empire," he announced. "Your weakness has made you prey. Perhaps you will provide some small entertainment before you die." What happened over the next 72 hours was broadcast across Zelvari space, streamed to millions of viewers who tuned in to watch the spectacle. The Warlord had decided to make his captives fight, pitting researcher against researcher in crude gladiatorial contests, forcing them to combat trained Zelvari warriors with improvised weapons. It was theater, a demonstration of dominance, a cultural event that reinforced every value Zelvari society held dear. Dr. Reeves lasted until the third day. Forced into an arena marked out on the station's cargo deck, given a metal rod to defend himself against a Zelvari warrior half again his size, he managed to land one solid blow before claws opened his torso like paper. As he lay dying, the cameras focused on his face, capturing his final words for the entertainment of millions. "You have no idea what you've done," he whispered, blood on his lips. "You have no idea what's coming for you." The Zelvari viewing audience found this hilarious. What could these weak, pathetic humans possibly do? They had no significant military, no warrior culture, no capacity for the kind of strength that mattered in the galaxy. The Warlord himself laughed as he broadcast a message to Earth's government, informing them that their citizens had provided excellent sport, and perhaps more humans would be taken if they proved as entertaining. On Earth, in the gleaming towers of the United Nations Diplomatic Corps, Ambassador Helena Cross watched the broadcasts with a face carved from stone. She had 3 children, all grown now, all safe on Earth. She tried to imagine what it would feel like to watch them murdered for entertainment, while the galaxy's laws proved too weak to stop it. She tried to imagine the families of those 47 researchers, technicians, and workers, seeing their loved ones torn apart on live broadcast. She tried to imagine forgiveness and found the concept slipping through her fingers like water. Earth's official response came within hours. The government filed formal complaints with the Galactic Council, demanded the immediate arrest and extradition of Warlord Krev'nash and all involved parties, proposed comprehensive sanctions against the Zelvari Empire, and threatened to withdraw from several key trade agreements if action was not taken. It was all very proper, very legal, very civilized. It was also completely ineffective. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, representatives from 847 species gathering in the vast chamber on Unity Station. They debated for 6 weeks. The Zelvari representative, a diplomat more polished than the warriors but no less convinced of his species' superiority, argued that the humans had been in disputed space, that their station had failed to properly identify itself, that Zelvari cultural traditions were protected under the Diversity Accords. Most species privately found these arguments absurd, but the Zelvari Empire was strong, and strong species were dangerous to oppose. The final vote was to condemn the incident in the strongest possible terms and to recommend that the Zelvari government conduct an internal investigation. No sanctions, no arrests, no justice. Just words, empty as vacuum, meaningless as the screams of 47 humans who had died for entertainment. On Zelvari Prime, Krev'nash was celebrated as a hero. His raid had proven Zelvari dominance, had shown these upstart humans their proper place in the galactic order. The Warlord gained political influence, attracting followers who believed his aggressive approach was exactly what the Empire needed. He gave speeches about honor and strength, about how softness led to extinction, about how the Zelvari would never apologize for being what evolution had made them. 3 months passed. The families of Kepler buried empty coffins, because the Zelvari had not bothered to return the bodies. Earth's government continued its diplomatic efforts, which continued to accomplish nothing. The galaxy moved on to other concerns, other crises, other news. The massacre became just another data point in the long history of injustice that civilized society preferred to forget. But in the darker corners of human space, in bars and meeting rooms far from official oversight, a different kind of response was taking shape. Commander Talara Winch of the Galactic Peacekeepers had compound eyes that could process multiple data streams simultaneously, a trait her insectoid species had evolved for navigating their homeworld's dense forests. She was using that ability now, reviewing incident reports from across 3 sectors, and the pattern she was seeing made her mandibles click with concern. Zelvari ships were disappearing. Not many at first, just a few pirates who failed to check in, some raiders whose beacons went dark in deep space. That happened sometimes in the vastness of the galaxy. Equipment failed, ships misjudged jumps, space was dangerous even without hostile action. But the frequency was increasing, and when Talara cross-referenced the missing vessels against their crew manifests, she found something interesting. Every single disappeared ship had crew members who had either participated in the Kepler raid or who had publicly celebrated it afterward. She brought her findings to her superiors, who told her the Peacekeepers had more pressing concerns than investigating what were likely just navigational accidents. She was assigned to monitor shipping lanes in Sector 49, a quiet region where nothing interesting ever happened, and where ambitious officers went to have their careers die slowly. Talara was not particularly ambitious, but she was thorough, and she could not let go of a pattern once she had identified it. She began her own investigation, using her off-duty hours and personal resources tracking down witnesses and analyzing debris fields. What she found disturbed her more with each discovery. The attacks were surgical. Ships were disabled, not destroyed. Crew members directly involved with Kepler-247 were killed or captured. Everyone else was left alive, placed in escape pods and directed toward the nearest safe station. The attackers used modified civilian vessels, ships that appeared on no military registry, tactics that suggested either pirates or mercenaries operating without government sanction. All human vessels, all targeting Zelvari. She traced one attack to a refueling station on the edge of neutral space, a place where questions were not asked and identification was optional. The station's sensors had logged a human freighter, the designation painted over but the drive signature still readable. Talara filed a request for docking and was granted permission after the standard bribe was transferred. The human she was looking for was not hard to find. Jackson Rourke was drinking synthetic whiskey at the station's only bar, a tall man with scars on his knuckles and eyes that had seen too much combat. He wore civilian clothes but moved like military, his posture suggesting someone who expected violence and was prepared to meet it. When Talara sat down across from him, he did not seem surprised. "Commander Winch," he said, pronouncing her name correctly despite never having met her. "You've been asking questions about missing Zelvari ships." "You know who I am," she observed. "Your investigation wasn't as subtle as you thought." He signaled for another drink. "But I appreciate thoroughness, shows you care about getting things right. You attacked a Zelvari transport 3 days ago, killed 12 crew members, let 38 go. Did I?" His tone was mild. "That's a serious accusation. Your ship was logged leaving this station 6 hours before the attack. The drive signature matches debris found at the scene." Rourke considered this, then shrugged. "All right, yes, I killed 12 Zelvari. Want to know why?" Talara's mandibles tightened. "You're confessing to murder. Those 12 were part of Krev'nash's crew. They participated in the Kepler massacre. One of them, a warrior named Threcknell, was the one who killed Dr. Marcus Reeves, broadcasted across the Empire, laughed about it in interviews." Rourke's voice remained level, but something cold moved behind his eyes. "Dr. Reeves was my professor at the Johannesburg Institute. Taught me everything I know about jump drive maintenance. Good man, had grandchildren. That doesn't give you the right to execute his killers." "Your laws didn't protect him," Rourke said simply. "Your council debated for 6 weeks and did nothing. The Zelvari broadcast his murder for entertainment and your civilization responded with a strongly worded letter." He leaned forward. "So yes, I killed them. I'll keep killing them until every single person involved with Kepler is dead or in custody. Call me a criminal if that makes you feel better. I call it justice. Vigilante justice, which is illegal under council law. So was broadcasting murder as entertainment. Funny how your laws only seem to apply to the weak." Talara had no response to that, because in her mandibles was the bitter taste of truth. She had read the council transcripts, had seen how species after species refused to act against the Zelvari, how political considerations outweighed justice, how the strong were protected while the weak were sacrificed. She had sworn an oath to uphold council law, but increasingly that oath felt like complicity. "How many others are doing what you're doing?" she asked. "Hundreds, maybe thousands by now." Rourke's expression softened slightly. "Look, Commander, I know you're just trying to do your job. But here's something you should understand about humans. We're not the strongest species, not the smartest, not the most advanced, but we remember. When someone hurts us, when someone takes our people and broadcasts their deaths for fun while the galaxy's laws do nothing, we remember, and we act. Outside the law abandoned those researchers the moment it failed to protect them." He stood, dropping payment for his drinks on the table. "You want to arrest me? Go ahead. There are 500 more just like me, and when I'm gone, someone else will take up the hunt. The Zelvari made a mistake, Commander. They thought humans were weak because we follow rules. They didn't understand that we only follow rules that work. When the rules fail, we improvise." He walked away, and Talara did not stop him. She sat in the bar for another hour, reviewing everything she knew, everything she had seen. Then she began digging deeper, and what she found was a network that would have impressed intelligence agencies across the galaxy. Human pirates were sharing information about Zelvari movements, passing along shipping schedules and patrol routes. Black market dealers refused to service Zelvari vessels, directing them to stations where hunters waited in ambush. Mercenary companies had created an informal bounty system, with higher rewards for individuals directly involved in the Kepler massacre. Some evidence suggested that Earth's intelligence services were accidentally leaking classified information about Zelvari military operations, plausible deniability maintained through a dozen cutouts and intermediaries. Earth's government publicly condemned the vigilante actions. Privately, they did not pursue any human involved with particular vigor. Ships were not tracked too carefully. Arrest warrants were issued but somehow never executed. When pressed by the Council, Ambassador Cross expressed deep regret that criminal elements were operating outside government control, while carefully noting that Earth's jurisdiction only extended so far, and with limited resources, they had to prioritize threats to human worlds over pursuing citizens who were, after all, only attacking those who had committed heinous crimes that the Council itself had failed to punish. It was a masterpiece of political theater, and Talara recognized it for what it was. Earth's government was getting revenge while maintaining diplomatic cover. The hunters were criminals, yes, but they were criminals the government had no real interest in stopping. 6 months after Kepler, Warlord Krev'nash decided that humanity had been allowed to continue its insolence long enough. The attacks on Zelvari ships were an insult to his species' honor, a challenge that demanded response. He gathered his most loyal followers and planned a raid that would remind these upstart humans of their proper place in the galactic order. 3 human colony worlds sat in a loosely defended system, agricultural settlements that supplied food to Earth's more industrialized planets. Krev'nash's fleet, 40 warships strong, jumped into the system and attacked the smallest colony, a farming community of 8,000 souls. The orbital defenses were minimal, the local militia barely trained. The Zelvari swept aside all resistance and landed ground forces. They took 217 prisoners, mostly civilians who had no military training and no capacity to fight back. Then, just as before, Krev'nash began broadcasting. He announced that these humans would provide entertainment for his empire, that they would fight for Zelvari amusement, that their weakness would be displayed for all to see. He issued a direct challenge to the human criminals hunting his people. Come fight properly if you dare. Face Zelvari warriors in open combat instead of ambushing ships in the dark. Ambassador Cross addressed the Galactic Council in emergency session. Her face was calm, her voice measured, her words chosen with diplomatic precision. She condemned the Zelvari attack, demanded immediate intervention, proposed that Council forces liberate the prisoners. Behind her carefully neutral expression, she was calculating the odds of the Council actually acting, and finding those odds approximately 0. "And what," asked the Zelvari representative, his scales gleaming under the chamber's lights, "does Earth intend to do about the criminals operating under your flag, these pirates and murderers who attack Zelvari vessels?" "We do not control these groups," Ambassador Cross replied. "They operate outside our jurisdiction, outside our laws. We condemn their actions as much as we condemn yours. Yet you do nothing to stop them. We have limited resources and must prioritize the safety of our colonies, resources that would be freed up if the Council would fulfill its responsibility to maintain order and protect civilians from being massacred for entertainment." Her tone remained perfectly diplomatic, but the implication was clear. We are doing everything legally possible to address criminal elements. Perhaps the Zelvari Empire should consider doing the same with warlords who broadcast murder for ratings. The vote that followed surprised no one. The Council expressed deep concern about the situation and recommended both sides exercise restraint. No action would be taken against the Zelvari. No forces would be sent to rescue the human prisoners. The galaxy's laws, once again, protected the strong and abandoned the weak. Privately after the session, Talara approached the human ambassador in one of Unity Station's diplomatic gardens. The insectoid peacekeeper and the human diplomat stood beside a fountain designed to suggest rainfall on a dozen different worlds, neither speaking for a long moment. "Do you have children, Commander?" Ambassador Cross asked finally. "I have spawned 3 clutches," Talara replied. 47 offspring in total. "Then you understand." The ambassador's voice was very quiet. "Imagine watching them tortured on live broadcast. Imagine the people responsible laughing about it, celebrating it, facing no consequences whatsoever. What would you do, Commander? What would any parent do? The law has failed, repeatedly, deliberately." Ambassador Cross turned to face her. "I know you're investigating the attacks on Zelvari vessels. I know you've identified patterns, traced operations, probably have enough evidence to bring charges. So let me save you some time. Yes, Earth knows what's happening. Yes, we could stop it if we truly wanted to. And no, we're not going to." She paused. "Those vigilantes are criminals, but they're criminals who are doing what the galaxy's civilized laws refuse to do. They're protecting humans when no one else will. So judge us if you must, Commander. Arrest whoever you can catch. But understand that we are done waiting for justice that never comes." Before Talara could respond, the ambassador's communicator chimed. She glanced at it and something changed in her expression, a tightness around the eyes that suggested she was receiving expected but unwelcome news. "The hunters are planning a rescue," she said softly. "They're going after the prisoners Krev'nash took. It's a suicide mission. The Zelvari stronghold is too well defended and the hunters don't have enough firepower. They're going to die trying to save those people. You could stop them." "I could. I won't. Because if I do nothing and they fail, at least they tried." "At least someone tried." Ambassador Cross met Talara's compound eyes. "The peacekeepers won't help, will they? The council has already decided those prisoners are acceptable losses." Talara thought about her oath, about duty, about the laws she had sworn to uphold. She thought about 47 researchers murdered for entertainment. She thought about 217 farmers facing the same fate. She thought about the patterns she had traced, the evidence she had gathered, the growing certainty that the criminals she was supposed to hunt were more honorable than the civilization she served. "Where is this rescue operation planned?" she asked. Jackson Rourke's assault force consisted of 17 ships, a patchwork fleet of modified freighters, former military vessels purchased on the black market, and pure pirate craft whose origins were best not examined too closely. They had approximately 300 fighters, most of them veterans of Earth's various military branches, now working outside official channels. Against them stood a Zelvari military stronghold with orbital defenses, ground-based weapons, and a garrison of over 2,000 trained warriors. The odds were not favorable. Rourke stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Vindication, reviewing the tactical situation for the dozenth time. Every simulation ended the same way. They could probably extract the prisoners, but casualties would be catastrophic. Half his force would die, maybe more. It was suicide. "We're still going," said his second-in-command, a woman named Angela Distriber who had lost her sister in the Kepler massacre. "No debate about that." "No debate," Rourke agreed. "Just want everyone to know what they're volunteering for." His crew had known. They had all volunteered anyway. That was the thing about humans that the galaxy kept underestimating. They formed bonds, created loyalties that transcended rational self-interest. Those 217 prisoners were strangers to most of Rourke's people, but they were human strangers. That made them family. That made them worth dying for. The fleet jumped into the system and immediately came under fire. Zelvari orbital defenses lit up the night with plasma bursts and missile salvos. Rourke's ships scattered, returning fire. Each vessel assigned specific targets in a battle plan they had rehearsed 100 times. The Vindication shuddered under impacts, hull plating ablating, shields flickering under sustained bombardment. Then something unexpected happened. A Peacekeeper cruiser emerged from jump space, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Commander Talara Winch of the Galactic Peacekeepers. I am invoking emergency authority to intervene in an ongoing hostage situation. All forces are ordered to stand down while I secure the civilian prisoners." On the Vindication's bridge, every station fell silent. Rourke stared at the tactical display, watching as the Peacekeeper cruiser maneuvered between his fleet and the Zelvari defenses. It was a ship with legitimate authority, powerful weapons, and shielding that could withstand everything the stronghold could throw at it. "She's helping us," Angela whispered. "Why is she helping us?" Rourke did not know, but he was not going to waste the opportunity. All ships, form up behind the Peacekeeper vessel. Use her shields as cover and focus on extracting the prisoners. What followed was chaos, a running battle through the stronghold's defenses with Talara's cruiser absorbing fire meant for the human ships. Her weapons systematically disabled orbital platforms while Rourke's ground forces stormed the prison facility. The Zelvari fought with the desperation of warriors whose honor was at stake, but they were facing humans who fought with something stronger than honor. They fought with fury, with determination, with the absolute refusal to leave anyone behind. The extraction took 43 minutes. 17 human fighters died, including Angela Distributor, who held a corridor alone while the last prisoners evacuated. But all 217 civilians were recovered, loaded onto transports, and jumped out of the system before Zelvari reinforcements could arrive. In the aftermath, in the quiet of her now damaged cruiser, Talara received the transmission she had been expecting. Her superiors stripped her of command, suspended her from the Peacekeepers, and opened an investigation into her unauthorized intervention. She had violated her oath, acted outside her authority, potentially triggered a diplomatic incident. She felt no regret whatsoever. With access to Talara's intelligence and the credibility her assistance had provided, Rourke's network of hunters became exponentially more effective. They struck Zelvari targets across 3 sectors simultaneously, a coordinated campaign that crippled the Empire's economy. Merchant vessels refused to travel without heavy escorts, which the Zelvari military could not provide without leaving their own worlds vulnerable. Trade routes collapsed. Tourism evaporated as other species decided Zelvari space was too dangerous to visit. The attacks were surgical, focused. No Zelvari civilians were killed, though plenty had their ships disabled and were left adrift until rescue arrived. The targets were always military installations, government facilities, economic infrastructure. The hunters made it clear, individual Zelvari were not the enemy, but the culture that celebrated what had happened at Kepler, the government that rewarded Krev'nash, the society that had broadcast murder as entertainment. Within 6 months, the Zelvari economy was in freefall. Planets that had imported 80% of their food were facing shortages. Industries dependent on interstellar trade were collapsing. Citizens who had cheered Krev'nash's raids were now protesting in the streets, demanding to know why their government had provoked these insane humans, why their leaders could not protect them from a species they had been told was weak. Warlord Krev'nash watched his empire crumble and felt something he had never experienced before: fear. Not fear of death in honorable combat, but fear of humiliation, of failure, of being remembered as the warrior who destroyed his own people through arrogance. He gathered his most loyal followers, perhaps 300 warriors who still believed in the old ways, and planned one final raid. He would attack a human colony world directly, taking thousands of prisoners, forcing Earth's government to negotiate. It would be a demonstration of strength, a reminder that Zelvari were still apex predators, still dangerous. It would restore his honor and prove that humans could be dominated. Rourke's intelligence network learned of the plan within hours of its conception. The hunters had informants throughout Zelvari space now, dissidents who had tired of their government's policies, military officers who saw the writing on the wall, civilians who just wanted the attacks to stop. The information flowed to Rourke, and he began planning something he called Operation Reckoning. The colony world Krev'nash had selected was called New Hanover, home to 40,000 settlers engaged in terraform operations. It appeared lightly defended, with only a small militia and outdated orbital platforms, the perfect target for a warlord trying to reclaim his reputation. It was also bait. Krev'nash's fleet emerged from jump space to find the colony apparently undefended. Sensors showed minimal military presence, no significant spacecraft, nothing to suggest this was anything but an easy raid. The Warlord smiled his predator's smile and gave the order to advance. 300 human ships decloaked simultaneously, surrounding the Zelvari fleet in a sphere of firepower. Every vessel Rourke's network had managed to acquire, repair, or steal over the past year was present, armed and ready. But they did not fire immediately. Instead, Rourke broadcast a message on all frequencies. Warlord Krev'nash, you are surrounded. Your fleet is disabled. Your shields will fail under our combined firepower within minutes. You have one chance to surrender. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. The Zelvari did not surrender easily. They fought because their culture demanded it, because honor required resistance, because admitting defeat was worse than death. But they were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and ultimately overwhelmed. One by one, their ships went dark, weapons offline, engines disabled. Rourke's team boarded the Flagship personally. They fought through corridors designed for 3-meter-tall warriors, faced Zelvari who preferred death to capture, and finally cornered Krev'nash on his own bridge. The Warlord stood surrounded by the bodies of his crew, claws extended, ready to die fighting. "You want to kill me," he snarled in Standard. "Then do it. Prove you are warriors after all." Rourke lowered his weapon. "No. You don't get to die in glorious combat. You don't get to be a martyr for your people to remember fondly." He signaled his team to take the Warlord prisoner. "We're going to try you for murder. Every victim will be named. Every crime will be documented. And you'll spend the rest of your very long life in a cell, remembering what you did and knowing that your arrogance destroyed your own empire." The trial took place on Earth, broadcast across human space and transmitted to every species in the galaxy. It lasted 3 weeks. Forensic evidence was presented, survivor testimony was heard, the broadcasts from Kepler were played in full. Krev'nash was given every opportunity to defend himself, provided with legal representation, afforded all the protections human law offered. He was found guilty on 47 counts of murder, 217 counts of kidnapping, and numerous other charges. The sentence was life imprisonment, to be served in solitary confinement, with years added for each victim's projected natural lifespan cut short by his actions. It would be centuries before he was eligible for parole. The Galactic Council convened in emergency session once more, though this time the debate was different. Some species demanded that the human vigilantes be arrested for their campaign against the Zelvari. Others pointed out that those vigilantes had accomplished what the Council had refused to do. They had stopped a predatory empire, protected civilians, and brought war criminals to justice. The debate was heated, with accusations flying across the chamber. Then Talara Winch, former Peacekeeper commander, was called to testify. She walked into the council chamber wearing civilian clothes, no longer representing any official authority, speaking only as someone who had witnessed events unfold. "For years," she said, her translator rendering her clicking mandibles into Standard, "the Zelvari raided weaker species. For years, we ignored it because they were strong and we were afraid. The laws we claimed to uphold protected the powerful and abandoned the weak. When they massacred 47 humans and broadcast it as entertainment, we did nothing. We debated, we condemned, we wrote strongly worded letters, but we did not act." She paused, her compound eyes sweeping across the assembled representatives. "Humans acted. They acted outside our laws because our laws had failed. They became criminals because being civilized meant watching their people die without consequences. And yes, what they did was illegal. It was also necessary. If the Council will not protect civilians from being murdered for entertainment, then the Council has abdicated its authority. If our laws only apply to the weak while the strong do as they please, then our laws are not justice. They are just oppression with better marketing." The chamber erupted in argument, but seeds had been planted. Over the following months, reform proposals were drafted. New enforcement mechanisms were created. Laws protecting civilians were strengthened, and critically, enforcement was no longer optional based on the target's military power. The galactic peacekeepers were restructured, given real authority to intervene when civilians were threatened, regardless of political considerations. It was too late for Kepler, but perhaps not too late for the next victims. On Zelvari Prime, the government collapsed in a bloodless coup. Military officers who had watched their economy crumble, who had seen their people suffer because of one warlord's arrogance, seized power and immediately sued for peace. They issued public apologies, paid reparations to the families of Kepler 247 victims, and promised to reform their culture's relationship with conquest and dominance. Whether those promises would be kept remained to be seen, but at minimum, the raids stopped. Zelvari's ships no longer prowled the space lanes looking for easy prey. Rourke's network quietly dissolved. Hunters returned to legitimate occupations, their mission accomplished, their point made. Some faced prosecution, but most were quietly pardoned by a grateful human government that officially had never authorized their actions. The black market dealers went back to dealing, the pirates to pirating, the mercenaries to taking contracts from paying clients. Jackson Rourke himself returned to running a small salvage operation based out of the same refueling station where Talara had first confronted him. He was sitting in the same bar, drinking the same synthetic whiskey, when she found him a year after the trial. "Commander Winch," he said, though she no longer held that rank, "still investigating crimes. Consulting now. The reformed peacekeepers hired me to help develop new intervention protocols." She settled into the seat across from him. "Seemed like useful work. Better than hunting vigilantes. I was never very good at that anyway." She ordered a drink, something from her homeworld that smelled like fermented flowers. "I wanted to ask you something. Was it worth it? The lives lost, the laws broken, the chaos you created." Rourke was silent for a long moment, staring at something only he could see. Finally, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small photograph, creased from being handled many times. It showed a man in his 60s, dark skin and kind eyes, standing beside a much younger Rourke in front of the Johannesburg Institute. "Dr. Reeves taught me that knowledge should serve humanity, that we study the universe not just to understand it but to make life better for our species and others." His voice was quiet. When the galaxy's laws failed him, when civilized society let him be murdered for entertainment and did nothing, someone had to act. So yes, it was worth it. Not because revenge feels good, it doesn't, but because the galaxy learned something important. What did it learn? That humans protect humans, always, that you can't torture our people on live broadcast and expect us to accept strongly worded letters as justice, that we follow the rules, we try diplomacy, we exhaust every legal option. But when all of that fails, when the laws abandon our people, we will act outside those laws. He met her eyes. "We prefer civilization. But we remember how to be uncivilized when necessary." Talara considered this, mandibles clicking softly. "And what did you learn? That justice and legality aren't always the same thing. That sometimes the criminals are the only ones willing to do what's right. And that being human means never forgetting our people, never abandoning them, never accepting that their deaths don't matter." He tucked the photograph away. "Dr. Reeves deserved better than he got. They all did. I couldn't give them their lives back, but I could make sure their deaths meant something." Outside the station, in the vast darkness of space, ships moved along newly peaceful trade routes. Zelvari merchant vessels traveled under guard but no longer feared human attack. The broadcasts that had once shown gladiatorial murder now showed debates about cultural reform and justice. The empire that had celebrated conquest was slowly, painfully, learning other values. Statistics compiled by the Galactic Council showed that attacks on civilian research stations had dropped by 99.8%. Human casualties from xenophobic violence were at the lowest levels in recorded history. Across the galaxy, a new saying emerged, usually spoken in quiet tones, often accompanied by nervous laughter. "Don't make the humans come for you." It was not a threat exactly, more of a warning. A reminder that humanity had tried civilization, had attempted to work within the galaxy's laws, had exhausted every diplomatic option. And when all of that failed, they had shown what happened when humans decided someone needed to face justice. Laws and governments had not protected the Zelvari from that reckoning. Power and military might had not saved them. In the end, they had learned what Dr. Marcus Reeves had tried to tell them with his dying breath. They had no idea what they had done, no comprehension of what would come for them. 47 researchers had died on Kepler. Their deaths had sparked a campaign that brought an empire to its knees, reformed galactic law, and taught the universe a lesson it would not soon forget. Humanity remembered. Humanity protected its own. And when the rules failed to deliver justice, humanity wrote new rules in fire and determination. Ambassador Helena Cross stood in her office on Unity Station, looking out at the stars that represented 847 different species, 847 different perspectives on what civilization meant. Her communicator showed messages from the families of Kepler, thanking her for everything Earth had done, officially and otherwise. She had not responded yet. What could she say? That their government had condemned the vigilantes while quietly ensuring they had the intelligence and resources to succeed. That diplomacy was sometimes just theater while real work happened in shadows. A chime announced a visitor. She turned to find the new Zelvari ambassador, a younger member of their species named Thelvas who had been appointed as part of their government's reform efforts. He stood in her doorway with the careful posture of someone entering a potential predator's territory. "Ambassador Cross," he said, his translator rendering his hissing speech into precise standard. "I hope I am not intruding. Ambassador Thelvas, please come in." She gestured to a chair designed to accommodate Zelvari proportions. "What can I do for you?" He settled into the seat with obvious discomfort, claws flexing against the armrests. "I wanted to speak with you privately, away from official channels, to say something that my government cannot yet say publicly." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "Thank you," Helena blinked. "I'm sorry, thank you for stopping us." His voice was barely above a whisper. "My people were on a path to destruction. We celebrated cruelty, rewarded dominance, taught our children that strength was the only virtue that mattered. Warlord Krev'nash was not an aberration. He was the logical conclusion of everything our culture valued, and we would have continued, raiding species after species, until someone strong enough to annihilate us completely decided we were too dangerous to tolerate. The hunters killed thousands of your people." "They killed hundreds," he corrected, "and only those directly involved in attacks on civilians. They disabled our economy without massacring our population. They captured our worst war criminal and gave him a trial instead of summary execution." His scales rippled with an emotion Helena's xenopsychology training suggested was shame. "Do you know what we would have done in their position? After watching our people tortured on live broadcast, we would have burned human worlds to ash. We would have gloried in revenge and called it honor." "Your species is capable of change," Helena said carefully. "The reforms your new government is implementing are only happening because humans forced us to change, because you showed us that our strength was an illusion, that our empire could be brought down by what we considered prey animals." He leaned forward. "I have spawned offspring, Ambassador, 3 children who will grow up in a different Zelvari culture because of what your people did. They will learn that strength includes mercy, that honor means protecting the weak, that civilization requires justice even when justice is difficult." He paused. "They will learn these things because humans taught their parents a lesson we could not ignore." After he left, Helena stood at her window for a long time, watching ships move through the darkness. She thought about the price of that lesson, the lives lost on both sides, the rules broken and laws violated. She thought about Dr. Reeves and his 46 colleagues, whose deaths had sparked something the galaxy would feel for generations. Her communicator chimed again. This time it was a message from Jackson Rourke, transmitted through enough encryption layers to make tracing it nearly impossible. The text was brief. "Job's done. Going back to honest work. Thank you for not trying too hard to stop us." She smiled slightly and deleted the message. Then she composed responses to the Kepler families, choosing her words carefully, telling them what she legally could. That their loved ones had not died in vain, that justice had been served even if the path to it was unconventional, that humanity had proven something important about itself, that they remembered, that they protected their own, that they would exhaust every civilized option before resorting to uncivilized ones, but they would resort to them if necessary. Across the galaxy, in bars and meeting halls and command centers, humans were having similar conversations. Veterans who had participated in the hunt were buying each other drinks, sharing stories they could never officially tell, mourning the friends who had not come home. Pirates were calculating whether legitimate trade might be more profitable now that Zelvari space was open again. Mercenaries were fielding new contracts, their rates having increased substantially now that the galaxy had seen what motivated humans could accomplish. And on thousands of human worlds, families gathered for meals and told their children about Kepler, about the researchers who had died studying the stars, about the warlord who had thought humans were weak, about the hunters who had proven him catastrophically wrong. The stories would become part of human culture, a reminder of who they were and what they were capable of when pushed beyond the limits of law and patience. In a prison facility on Earth, constructed specifically to hold non-human inmates, Warlord Krev'nash sat in a cell designed for someone of his size and strength. The walls were transparent aluminum, allowing him to see but not touch the world outside. He had been there for a year, with centuries more to serve, time measured not by his own lifespan but by the lives he had stolen. Once per month he was allowed a visitor. Usually no one came. Today someone did. Jackson Rourke stood outside the cell, studying the Zelvari warlord who looked smaller somehow, diminished by captivity and time. Krev'nash did not rise to acknowledge his visitor, did not display any of the prideful posturing that had once defined his every movement. "Have you come to gloat?" The warlord asked in standard, his translator still functional even if nothing else from his old life remained. "No," Rourke said. "I came because I wanted to understand something. Why did you do it? The galaxy has millions of targets if you wanted to prove your strength. Why broadcast it? Why make it entertainment?" Krev'nash was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an emotion Rourke had not expected: regret. "Because my culture taught me that dominance was everything. That showing strength, inspiring fear, making others acknowledge your superiority, these were the highest virtues. The broadcasts were not cruelty for its own sake. They were cultural expression. They were art in a twisted way. They were everything I had been taught to value. And now I sit in this cell and understand that my culture was wrong. That strength without wisdom is just violence. That inspiring fear is not the same as earning respect. That the universe will tolerate many things, but it will not tolerate civilizations that celebrate cruelty." He finally looked at Rourke. "You broke my empire, killed my followers, destroyed everything I built, and you were right to do it. The Zelvari needed to be stopped before we became a threat that would have to be exterminated completely. Is that an apology?" "It is an acknowledgement. Apologies cannot resurrect the dead, but perhaps understanding can prevent future deaths." Krev'nash's claws scraped against the floor. "Tell me something, human. If your council had acted immediately, if they had arrested me after Kepler and brought me to trial, would your people still have hunted mine?" Rourke considered the question carefully. "Probably not. If the law had worked, we would have trusted it, but the law failed. And that failure taught us something important. We can't rely on others to protect humanity. We have to protect ourselves. A dangerous lesson. A necessary one." Rourke turned to leave, then paused. "Dr. Reeves used to say that the universe doesn't care about fairness. It doesn't punish evil or reward good. Those are things civilizations have to do for themselves. Your empire forgot that. You thought strength made you immune to consequences. You were wrong." He left the Zelvari warlord sitting in his transparent cell, a monument to what happened when predatory cultures encountered prey that could fight back. The prison guards logged the visit but did not comment. Krev'nash received few visitors, and those he did get were often humans connected to Kepler in some way. Coming to see the monster caged, perhaps. Coming to confirm he was really powerless. Coming to remember. 5 years after Kepler 247, the Galactic Council held a memorial service at Unity Station. Representatives from every species gathered to honor the 47 researchers who had died, acknowledging their sacrifice and the changes it had sparked. A monument was unveiled, listing every name, every specialty, every contribution they had made to humanity's understanding of the universe. Dr. Marcus Reeves, astrophysics, 8 years of service at Kepler, survived by 3 children and 7 grandchildren. Yuki Tanaka, radiation analysis, 4 years of service, survived by her parents and 2 siblings. The list continued, each name a person, each person a life cut short by arrogance and cruelty. The families were present, standing together, accepting condolences from species who had previously done nothing to help them. Some accepted graciously, others did not hide their bitterness. All of them carried the weight of loss that would never fully heal. Ambassador Cross gave a speech, carefully crafted to acknowledge pain without assigning blame, to honor the dead without reopening diplomatic wounds. But her final words were unscripted, spoken from the heart of someone who had watched justice fail and then be forged in fire outside official channels. These people dedicated their lives to expanding knowledge, to making the universe better understood and more accessible to all species. They harmed no one. They threatened nothing. They should have been protected by every law we have created, every value we claim to share. She paused, her voice strengthening. Their deaths taught us that laws without enforcement are just words, that justice delayed is justice denied, that civilization means protecting the vulnerable, not making excuses for the powerful. In the audience, Jackson Rourke sat beside Talara Winch, both of them wearing civilian clothes, neither officially acknowledged but both recognized by anyone who had followed the events of the past 5 years. They did not speak, but their presence said everything that needed saying. Humanity had learned to work within galactic civilization. They had also learned to work outside it when necessary. And the galaxy had learned that humans remembered, that they protected their own, that they would exhaust every peaceful option before resorting to violence, but would not hesitate once that line was crossed. It was a delicate balance, that relationship between humanity and the wider galaxy. Built on mutual respect earned through conflict, maintained through the understanding that rules only worked when everyone followed them, stabilized by the knowledge that humans preferred civilization, but remembered how to be uncivilized. The memorial service concluded with a moment of silence. 847 species, countless billions of individuals, stopping for 60 seconds to remember 47 humans who had died 5 years earlier. It was a small gesture, perhaps inadequate compensation for lives lost, but it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was the galaxy admitting that those deaths mattered, that the victims deserved to be remembered, that justice had been necessary even if the path to it had been unconventional. In a bar on the edge of human space, in a prison cell on Earth, in diplomatic offices and military commands across the galaxy, humans marked the anniversary in their own ways. Some raised glasses to absent friends. Some reviewed case files, ensuring every person involved with Kepler 247 had faced justice. Some simply remembered, holding tight to the names and faces of those who had been taken. And in the darkness between stars, human ships moved freely, protected not just by laws and treaties but by something more fundamental. The galaxy's hard-won understanding that humanity was not weak, not easily victimized, not willing to accept that their people's deaths did not matter. The Zelvari had learned that lesson at terrible cost. Their empire was reformed, their culture changing, their future uncertain but at least no longer built on the suffering of others. Other species watched and learned, adjusting their own calculations about what was acceptable, what humanity would tolerate, where the lines were that should not be crossed. Don't make the humans come for you. Not a threat, a warning, a reminder that civilization was a choice humans made every day, not a weakness they were cursed with. A promise that they would try every peaceful option before resorting to violence, but that violence remained an option when all else failed. And in the memory of 47 researchers who had wanted nothing more than to study the stars, in the justice finally served and the reforms finally implemented, in the changed galaxy that would never again dismiss humans as too weak to matter, their legacy lived on. They had died as victims, But their deaths had forged something stronger than any empire. The galaxy's understanding that humanity, fuck yeah, would always protect its own, always remember its dead, always ensure that their losses were not meaningless, their sacrifices not forgotten. The universe did not care about fairness, but humanity did. And when pushed far enough, when their people were taken and their laws were ignored and their patience was exhausted, they would make the universe care too. That was the lesson of Kepler 247. Written in fire and determination, paid for in lives on both sides, carved into the collective memory of every species that traveled the stars. A lesson the galaxy would not forget for 1,000 generations. Humanity had arrived among the stars as explorers and students, eager to learn and contribute. They remained explorers and students, but now every species knew what lay beneath that peaceful exterior. The capacity for coordinated violence, for patient vengeance, for justice pursued regardless of cost or law or diplomatic consequence. The researchers of Kepler had not wanted that legacy. They had wanted knowledge, discovery, understanding. But in their deaths they had given humanity something else. The galaxy's respect, earned through fire, maintained through strength tempered with restraint, proven through justice finally served. It was not the legacy anyone would have chosen, but it was the one they had, and humanity would honor it. They would remember, they would protect their own, and they would ensure that never again would humans be murdered for entertainment while the galaxy looked away. That was the promise, written in the stars themselves, as permanent as the neutron star that still burned where Kepler had once orbited, as enduring as the memory of 47 names that humanity would never forget. The story of humans being amazing was not about being the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. It was about being the species that remembered, that kept faith with their dead, that would move heaven and earth to ensure justice was served even when the entire galaxy said it was impossible. That was humanity, fuck yeah. Not perfect, not infallible, but absolutely, utterly unwilling to accept that their people's lives did not matter, and the galaxy had learned to respect that. Finally, belatedly, at terrible cost, but learned nonetheless.